like it. I like it. So we're fielding questions on all of our platforms, mainly on our YouTube channel. So drop them in the live chat. We'll get to them. We got a couple questions off of Twitter first. Obviously, it's been a busy day for the Patriots, and not in a good way if you're Bill Belichick. 6 players have decided to opt out of the 2020 season. Let's just go through them real quick. It started with Marcus Cannon. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it started with Marcus Cannon last night at about midnight, yes.
Right, and then we also have Dan Vitale, Brandon Bolden, Patrick Chung, Dante Hightower, the bigger names coming out today for sure when it comes to Dante Hightower and Patrick Chung. So we got a couple questions here on Twitter. With all these veteran players opting out now, is there a better chance that a UDFA makes the team and the streak continues?
Well, I think that, whenever a player goes down, whether it's an injury or it's in this case an opt-out, it always presents an opportunity for somebody else, and the door always opens, and the beat will go on, right? As crazy as it sounds to hear all these opt-outs around the league, the Patriots and all these other teams, they're still going to play games in September. So yeah, I think it does help the UDFAs just a little bit. Now, they don't have a ton of tackle depth necessarily out of this UDFA class, so I'm not sure if that's exactly where they're going to go with it, but I do think based off of reports and things that I've heard about Jeff Thomas, Nick Coe, Bill Murray, those guys have made at least a little bit of an impression to stick around for the time being. So I think it could mean good things for the UDFAs and the UDFA streak, but right now I think the most pressing thing is finding guys that are ready right now to fill the shoes of Cannon, Chung, Hightower. Some of these guys are some big name players, and it's not going to be UDFA that's going to start at right tackle.
Well, we do know that the Patriots, previous to all these opt-outs, cut 9 players. They're trying to whittle their way down to the 80-person roster for training camp. A lot of those UDFAs, they did re-sign or re-bring in Will Hastings, kind of reversed their decision after a couple of the opt-outs came through. But Leon wants to know, who do you see having a good chance of sticking around?
Out of the UDFAs, I mean, we've talked about this one a lot, right, Sierra? Mm-hmm. And I think that really the buzz is Jeff Thomas, right? And I know that Jeff Howe reported that Thomas has made a good impression on coaches so far in virtual meetings. We know what he can do on the field when his head is right and when his head is screwed on straight, and that is be a very, very explosive and productive outside and inside wide receiver that the Patriots really could benefit from with that speed on the outside especially. So he's the most talented guy out of this group. But I truly think that if you look at the depth charts across the team and sort of the way that this is going to shape up, that Bill Murray has a really good inside track from being that 4th or 5th defensive tackle for the Patriots. They're a little bit thin at that spot, whereas I think at wide receiver they have a little bit more depth for guys that they're going to want to carry over into next season. So I think Jeff Thomas has a great chance. I think J.J. Taylor now with Brandon Bolden's news has a decent chance. But basically, in all, I really do feel like Bill Murray is still one of the guys that I have at the top of my list.
And we have a question here about the opt-outs. 6 players, obviously. I think they account for half, if not more than half, of all of the league's opt-outs combined. So the Patriots definitely in an interesting situation. The dominoes continue to fall. Which of the opt-outs is the most impactful for the Patriots?
It's not even close. It's Dante Hightower, and you got a player in Hightower that's basically, in my estimation, the heart and soul of your defense, not only from a physical standpoint on the field, but also from a mental standpoint and a leadership standpoint. This is a guy that makes all the checks, makes all the calls in the front 7, is an extension of the coaching staff in that way, plays multiple spots in that front 7, edge defender, inside linebacker, on the line of scrimmage over the guard or the center rushing the passer, very much involved in a lot of the Patriots' pressure schemes, led all off-ball linebackers and quarterback pressures a year ago, big-time run stuffer, big-time physicality at the point of attack. We know all of that. He has, I think, gotten a little bit springier in recent years, too, in coverage. He's gotten more into speed training and away from the weight training a little bit, and it's turned into a little bit more of a better coverage player and space player than he was at times throughout his career. So really, when you look at big games, you look at big moments, it's always been Dante Hightower is one of the best playoff players out of the Patriots dynasty, I would say, over the last 2 decades, not just this decade. So I think that it's really no question that Dante Hightower is the hardest player to replace. They don't really have one player on the roster who I think will be able to be up for and be able to do it. And I really think that they might look out of house, at some of the candidates in free agency, especially like a Davian Clowney or some of the other names I threw out in the post that I just wrote today, to really kind of take on some of that responsibility of making big splash plays behind the line of scrimmage and in the backfield. Because ultimately, with Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins, and now Dante Hightower all gone for the 2020 season, it's those big, impactful plays behind the line of scrimmage that they're going to need to replace.
Well, one positive if you're the Patriots is extra cap space, right? They went from weeks ago having little to none to now having a lot. Do you see the Patriots making some additions or just carrying a majority of that cap space into 2021?
Well, Sierra, I think the benefit for the Patriots here with the pandemic is that they're actually in great shape for the 2021 season and 2021 free agency. They might be one of, I think it's about 5 or 6 teams that are even going to have cap space next year because the floor of the salary cap is going to plummet so much due to the pandemic. So the Patriots are going to be in a situation where there's going to be a plethora of free agents, like a normal free agent class, and this class next year is actually a pretty good one. And there might only be 4 or 5 teams with cap space that can even make an offer to any of these guys. So they might have their pick of the litter. So I think that Bill Belichick is going to look at this and say, I really would like to carry over that space. Now, that being said, I could definitely see them signing a player to a veteran minimum type of contract, like we've seen them do with guys like Cam Newton, for example, and bringing in just bodies at some of these spots. I theorize guys like a Nigel Bradham or a Deron Lee. Those players, I think, are a little bit more realistic to replace Hightower. Maybe guys to replace Marcus Cannon. They could call upon Lee Adrian Waddle or Marshall Newhouse again, or go the Cordy Glenn or DeMar Dotson route, of guys that are not necessarily going to break the bank for them, that are more veteran minimum or kind of salary cost effective, let's call it, signings for them, not the splash players like a Clowney or a Yannick Ngakoue or whoever. That would be awesome, or Everson Griffin, but I don't see that happening because of the way that the pandemic is impacting the salary cap. I think they would rather carry that space over to next year.
We have a question coming in here from Glenn on Twitter, and it's about the ability for these young guys like Josh Uche, Anthony Jennings, and even throws in Chase Winovich. Are they ready and able to fill that void since all of the boogeymen, the entire starting linebacking core, is gone from last season?
It's kind of a big deal, I think, right now for the Patriots, to say the least, to put it lightly. And I think the biggest thing with Uche and Jennings and Winovich, those 3 guys in particular, just find one role that you're good at, right? Just find one thing, one niche that you can make for yourself. Maybe with Uche, it's, the ability to rush the pass, or from the weak side of the formation, that speed, that first step explosiveness, those pass rush moves that pop when you watch them on tape. Maybe that's it. With Jennings, maybe it's replacing Kyle Van Noy a little bit as an on-the-ball linebacker that can play on the strong side of the formation and force running plays. With Winovich, I really think he needs to blossom. He needs to take that next step because he's the one guy that does have experience out of these youngsters in the system, playing 30% of the snaps last year. This year, he's going to be looking at 60, 70, 80% of the snaps quite easily, I think. So he's going to be the one I think they're going to lean on heavily. Uche and Jennings, it's same with Winovich last year, who kind of found a role in that third down pressure package. Just find a situation that you can stick in. Find a role that you can stick in and be productive within that role. And I think the Patriots will be able to mix and match from there.
Glenn's asking us also about replacing Patrick Chung at safety. A lot more in-house options here for the Patriots because they do have a deep secondary. He's mentioning Logan Ryan. Can he play safety, or would you consider signing him to play slot corner and moving John Jones to safety?
I don't think it's really necessary for the Patriots to sign Logan Ryan. I mean, I think that Logan Ryan deserves a job, and it's kind of crazy that he's still a free agent because he played extremely well for the Titans last year in the slot. But I think that mainly when you look at this, they were preparing for Patrick Chung to either retire or for the team to actually move on for Patrick Chung since last offseason when they signed Terrence Brooks to a free agent contract, and they signed Adrian Phillips to a similar free agent contract this offseason, draft Kyle Duggar. They've had this in mind now for a while, and Chung's play over the last couple of seasons, especially his play in coverage, has really declined. And last year he gave up over 70% of his passes into his coverage were completed, which was a career low for Chung, or career high, whichever way you want to look at it. Career worst, let's put it to you that way, right? And it was kind of, you were already seeing the writing on the wall, I think, with Chung, that maybe his play was declining just a little bit and he was losing a step or two. So I think the Patriots were really ready for this one, and I think that this just kind of accelerates the post-Chung era and moving on from Chung. And I think the guy that they really want to take that position is Duggar, but probably this year it will be a combination of Adrian Phillips and Terrence Brooks.
Well, moving on to another opt-out, Marcus Cannon here at right tackle. Ashwin in our YouTube chat is asking, do you expect Kajus to win the starting right tackle position, or do you believe Corey Cunningham has a chance?
Well, I think that Kajus is really the leader in the clubhouse for me because of his upside and because of his ability to pass protect at a really high level. He's got great hands, great upper body strength, really stocky, burly type of guy. He's got decent foot speed as well for a tackle. You know, he's going to have a little bit of a transition here from an air raid system at West Virginia into the New England system, which has a much more especially 5-step drops, but maybe even a few 7-step drops, depending on what they want to do with play action with Cam or Stidham or whoever is the quarterback. So I think that there's a little bit of an adjustment there for Kajus, that maybe he might not be ready right away to fill in there. Corey Cunningham, on the other hand, I mean, listen, they played Marshall Newhouse over him for 7 games, 9 games appearances, 7 starts, and really were kind of set on Newhouse over Cunningham. I'd find it hard to believe that Cunningham is now all of a sudden going to be the starting right tackle after not being able to leapfrog Newhouse on the depth chart last year. Now, he does have great athletic upside, 96th percentile in the combine back in 2017, I believe it was. Really good 40 time, really good vertical jump. He's a former tight end that converted to tackle at Cincinnati in college. He definitely has some upside there with his athletic profile, but body control, ability to change directions, that sort of thing has been an issue for him.
Moving right on down the list, Dan Vitale, fullback, another person who decided to opt out. Less of an impact, obviously, for the Patriots, but it would have been exciting to see what he could have brought. But Ryan Sullivan asking, with Vitale opting out, how much will Dalton Keene play fullback or be on the field now?
Well, I think the question is what kind of fullback do the Patriots want moving forward? And I think that, we've gotten so used to that James Devlin power I formation, quarterback under center, let's knock the bowling pins down. And that's really been, what the Patriots offense has been all about. But I think we all know with Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick especially that evolution is always key here, right? And they always evolve the offense or the defense or whatever to the personnel that they have. So just because they had James Devlin before, and they were running sort of that old school fullback style of offense when he was on the field, doesn't mean the next guy is going to do these same exact things. So I think Jakob Johnson has that ability. We saw it last year when he played for those 2 games before he got hurt to be that traditional fullback. So my guess is they keep Jakob Johnson and Dalton Keene, who's obviously going to make the roster, on the team together so that they can be that power I formation if they need to be one week. But another week, I could definitely see Dalton Keene filling in as more of an H-back. His primary locations in Virginia Tech weren't the same as what you see with the Patriots offense. He's not a guy that was lining up right in front of the running back and leading through the hole necessarily, but he was playing off the line of scrimmage a little bit more in that H-back role where he could slide across the formation, get out in front of runs, and also get out of the backfield to catch passes in the flats. That's really a different sort of role, but I think that it still can be effective, and the Patriots can easily kind of transition both Keene and themselves to kind of fit somewhere in the middle between those types of roles.
And on our YouTube live chat, show is bringing up Devin McCourty and Jason McCourty and how they've been vocal about their concerns as well about the upcoming season. I know Jeff Howe of The Athletic reported earlier today that the Patriots do expect the opt-outs to be over, at least for now, and barring some unforeseen changes. However, it's hard not to speculate that the McCourtys, if their questions aren't answered by the league and by their team, that they might make a similar decision. What happens if they decide to opt out, or the worst case scenario comes true for this defense? Because if we're talking Jason and Devin also opting out, this is a whole different defense that the Patriots are working with.
If they don't have Devin McCourty here without already losing Dante Hightower, then the word rebuilding year is going to have to start coming out, right? And I'm not talking about that Bill Belichick's going to tank or Bill Belichick's going to purposely lose any games, but I do think that you're going to have to look at this season a little bit differently into a developmental year for the young players that they have on the roster. Can they get the draft classes from the last 2 or 3 years up to speed so that at the point next year when they have all that cap space and all that kind of ability to move around the roster, then they can kind of build this thing back up to a Super Bowl contender, because this season it's kind of hard and far-fetched to think that they would still be contenders to win a Super Bowl without their two leaders on defense and with the losses that they had, obviously, with Brady on the offensive side of the ball already this offseason. So I think that really starts the rebuild or the retool, whatever you want to call it, if McCourty does sit out. But the one thing, listening to their double coverage podcast and some of the other things that I've seen on the McCourtys, is that they're also very well aware that if you sit out the season, then your job might not be there when you come back. And especially in Jason McCourty's case, he made that point. And I think it's interesting when you look at the cornerback depth chart, he understands. He sees the writing on the wall. He sees J.C. Jackson. He sees Jawan Williams. He sees John Jones just got a contract extension. He knows Gilmore's already there. So I think that what you see with Jason McCourty is that he does not have any guarantees from the organization, of course. And really, when you look at it from the outside looking in, any guarantees that he's going to have a roster spot if he sits out the season and lets those guys take his spot this year and develop and get further along. So I think that in some respects, there's obviously health concerns. There's obviously issues that you want to think about. But for those two guys in particular who are kind of nearing the end of their careers and have, maybe 1-2 years left in the tank, it might push it down the road a little bit too far if they start sitting out the season.
Ryan's bringing up David Andrews and whether or not we think there will be more opt-outs, especially because he missed all of last season due to some blood clots in his lungs. But there have been reports that David Andrews plans to participate in the upcoming season. But to the point you just made, we also have another question from Alex. Which of the guys that are opting out this season do you think have the best chance at being back next season?
Well, the one good news, or the silver lining, I should say, about the opt-out is obviously the cap space in the short term, right? But in the long term, the good news is that because Dante Hightower, for example, is going to sit out the season, his contract now pauses, and he's still under contract with the team in 2021, where he was set to be a free agent at the end of the year. So the Patriots, don't get Hightower this year, but now they get Hightower next year when he was supposed to be off the books. So I think in a way, Hightower kind of sitting out the year, at least they'll have him around next year, and they won't have to deal with that free agency, right? And that fallout if they do lose him in free agency. So I think that he obviously has the best chance to return next year. Marcus Cannon, I had a source tell me that Marcus Cannon's retiring from football, and this is likely to be it for him in the NFL. So I'd be pretty shocked if he plays anywhere next year, even in New England, but his contract also tolls, so he'll be under contract with the Pats as well. So all these guys are going to be on the 2021 roster. The question is there going to be a roster spot for them, or is the team going to then kind of say, well, we've sort of moved on because you sat out the season last year?
And Show bringing up the coaching staff as well, because a lot of people on the coaching staff are older and also have personal issues themselves. He brings up Steve Belichick, who is supposed to be having a child in November. Crazy to think what could be happening to this team if the coaching staff begins to shrink as well.
Well, this is the problem, I think, Sierra, for the entire league right now, is that we've already seen 6 opt-outs from the Patriots. No coaches have opted out quite yet. I think the coaches, I've not heard a single thing about any of the Patriots coaches opting out. They're all planning on coaching this season, including Bill Belichick, who is, 67, 68 now? So he's in that sort of high-risk category, too. All these coaches are planning on coaching this season, and there's really no expectation that they're going to opt out or anything like that. But with that being said, the risk is still there, right? That doesn't mean just because they're opting into the season that the pandemic has disappeared. I think when you look across the league and you see 6 Patriots have decided to opt out already, these guys are also intelligent people. Marcus Cannon, Dante Hightower, Patrick Chung, they've been around the block. They understand the league. They understand the dynamics. And I think that when they look at it, they don't deem it to be safe right now. And I think that that's crazy for many reasons, obviously. But when you look at the league, at what point in time they're expecting opt-outs. They're expecting a pretty high percentage of opt-outs. But at what point in time do they say to themselves, wow, all these players are telling us that this is not safe. 20% of the league has opted out for the season. At what point does it become too much? And do we have to revisit either how we're playing the season, where we're playing the season, or if we're playing the season at all? So I think that's really the kind of the trump card the players have, so to speak, is that they can sort of push the league's hands a little bit here by opting out of the season and sort of proving the point that, your regulations and your protocols right now don't go far enough.
Yeah, I'd love to also see the median age of all the players who have opted out around the league, because it definitely is more of an easy decision and sometimes an obvious decision for these veteran players who are older and have made their money and especially the Patriots, who have won 3 Super Bowls in a couple of their cases, they don't have much else to prove. So
Yeah.
might as well stay home with the family and stay safe at this point. But a couple more questions here before we wrap up this live chat. Robert asking a more defense-oriented question. With so many of these veteran linebackers moving on and Dont'a Hightower opting out, do you see the Patriots moving from a base 3-4 to a 4-3?
I don't, this question's been asked a lot, but who's going to play? Who's the 4 down lineman that we're going to put in the 4-3? It's kind of it's one way or the other. You're kind of screwed, right? They don't have the insane depth that they had at linebacker last year, but then they also don't have great depth at the defensive line. So we'll see what Belichick does with this cap space. Maybe he adds some bodies to one position or another to kind of bolster it and transition away from one thing or the other. But I also think it's important to remember that the Patriots front is very multiple. They hardly ever have, a true base 3-4. They did it a lot last year because of the boogeyman and because of how successful they were with all those linebackers. But as they added defensive backs on the field, their defensive effectiveness only improved statistically. So I really think that at the end of the day, they're going to play a ton of snaps with 2-3 defensive linemen because they're going to want those linebackers, even though the safeties, up on their feet, moving around before the snap and confusing offensive linemen and opposing quarterbacks.
Last question here. What roster bubble guys do you see having a path to making the roster now with all of these opt-outs? We haven't talked much about Brandon Bolden, but could this be Damian Harris's chance?
This is Damian Harris's chance, but in terms of guys on the bubble, I think J.J. Taylor is really the guy that can benefit a ton from all of this. I truly think that he's got a really good chance to make this team now, not only because Bolden is going to lose some snaps at running back, but also because of his ability to play on special teams and in the return game. Bolden, remember, was the primary kick returner last year, so the Patriots are going to need to replace that role as well, and J.J. Taylor has great effectiveness at Arizona returning kicks. So I could definitely see J.J. Taylor, this being kind of the move he needed to happen, so to speak, to make this team. And I would expect him to actually make it now. Honestly, if I had to make a 53-man roster projection, I'd probably put J.J. Taylor now on the roster. I think elsewhere, in terms of bubble guys, I don't think it helps out a ton of some of the guys that we've talked about. Maybe Derek Rivers has a chance now to make the team again, now that the door is open with Hightower opting out. I think Terrence Brooks was certainly a guy, too, that could have been a veteran on the bubble due to the depth that they've had in the secondary, and now probably that's not going to be the case either.
Your newly trimmed up beard getting a shout out in the YouTube comments.
I had to clean it up for training camp,
Love it. Well, we also went in depth on the opt-outs of Dont'a Hightower, Patrick Chung, and Marcus Cannon. You can find those on our website at clnsmedia.com, as well as on our YouTube channel at Patriots Press Pass. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any of the Patriots content we turn out on a daily basis. We'll be back here live, same time, same place, with our new fancy platform on Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you then.